super handy. But there's actually a more useful point of this, and that is because we need to get a blaze burner. A blaze burner, we need an empty blaze burner for, which is something that we can make. We need netherrack, but once we've done that and we have a few empty blaze burners, we can use our blaze spawner, and if we right click it, it'll give us a blaze burner. If you have blazes, you can also right click them and you'll get a blaze burner as well. So you can do one or the other. The blaze spawner is much easier, so that's probably what I would recommend, but any way that you want to get a blaze burner would be good, and then you can always turn off the spawner again with a lever and the cart assembler. Once we have our blaze burners, we can head back into the overworld, back to our safety of our base, and we can get to making brass for the first time. The recipe for brass is rather simple. We just need copper and zinc in a mixer to make it, which is why in the beginning of the video I talked about how important copper and farms. Now that we have a super basic farm and system here, we need to get to the nether. And this is kind of just a vanilla way to do it. You don't have to do anything fancy. You just need diamonds, obsidian, another portal, and to get to the nether. Because right now we are locked behind all the things that are needed that require brass. And brass requires a blaze burner, which we need to go to the nether to grab a blaze. So once we have all the materials to go to the nether, we just need to make another portal, head in, and we are basically looking for a stronghold like you would in normal vanilla Minecraft. Oh, of course we're in the worst 2 biomes in the world. While you're looking for a stronghold, it is absolutely recommended to get as much quartz as you can, just so that you don't have to go back into the nether and get more. It's not super useful. Redstone is used more, but getting quartz will absolutely help you out in the long run. And once you've found another fortress, all we need to do is find a blaze spawner. And once you have one, just make sure to try to spawn proof it as best you can. Depending on your create mod game, you might be able to, with a minecart contraption, pick up this blaze spawner, which will make it no longer dangerous. As you can see, when we pick it up, this thing no longer turns on, and you can transport this wherever you want, which means you can make a massively OP blaze or XP farm over near where your nether portal is, which is super handy. But there's actually a more useful point of this, and that is because we need to get a blaze burner. A blaze burner, we need an empty blaze burner for, which is something that we can make. We need netherrack, but once we've done that and we have a few empty blaze burners, we can use our blaze spawner, and if we right click it, it'll give us a blaze burner. If you have blazes, you can also right click them and you'll get a blaze burner as well. So you can do one or the other. The blaze spawner is much easier, so that's probably what I would recommend, but any way that you want to get a blaze burner would be good, and then you can always turn off the spawner again with a lever and the cart assembler. Once we have our blaze burners, we can head back into the overworld, back to our safety of our base, and we can get to making brass for the first time. The recipe for brass is rather simple. We just need copper and zinc in a mixer to make it, which is why in the beginning of the video I talked about how important copper and zinc both were. Brass is used for so many different things, and having a lot of it is very beneficial. As you can see, we need a mixer and a basin, but we do need a blaze burner underneath that is heated. If you already have a mixer setup, we'll just need to place a blaze burner underneath the basin, as shown in the graphic here. We just have mixer, basin, blaze burner. And now that that's underneath, we need a way to power this thing. In the base create mod, you can only power it with right-clicking it with fuel. Spruce planks is a fuel source. So when you right click it, you can see, and up at the top, there is a certain amount of time left on this thing. You can feed it anything that you can feed a furnace. If it goes in a furnace, it'll go in a blaze burner. Coal, logs, sticks, fences, anything that is burnable in a furnace will work here, including buckets of lava. They all have different time frames. As you can see, planks are only 15 seconds, but a lava bucket you can see now is 16 minutes and 50 seconds, making it way more useful to use lava. In certain mod packs, you may be able to connect pipes up to blaze burners and pump lava in directly, but those are separate mods and not in the base create mod. Now that we have our burning blaze burner, we can just throw in copper and zinc into this, and it'll start getting mixed into brass. Once you get to a stack of brass, we can see up at the top, that will prevent this thing from making any more, and that's because the output is full. We can go back to automating it like we do with belts or depots, but I'm not going to do that right now just because this is a tutorial. You will likely want to automate this process as much as you can, having space for, like, let's say putting in copper and zinc into a thing so that it will automatically do it for you. I've never done that really, but you obviously can, and it will probably help. Before we continue with our brass, there is something that I would like to note. It is possible that you have a different mod pack or something that if there's heated brass in a thing, it'll turn into liquid brass. If that's the case, make sure you set the filter here. You can use a list filter and drag brass in from JEI if you don't have it yet. So that's the way to do it if that's happening to you. But now that we have brass, what do we do with it? If you look up in JEI, there are a lot of different things that you can now create from it. If we look at all the things you can actually craft, there's only 3 things: flywheels, brass tunnels, and brass funnels. The rest are just blocks or nuggets of the thing. This doesn't seem that helpful, but there is one thing that brass makes that is even more helpful: brass sheets. With a simple press, you could press brass into brass sheets, which are then used for a ton of different smart contraptions. These smart contraptions are all used to fuel and power more fancy things, which will make it possible to automate stuff. I am going to try my best here to explain everything to you in the ways that I know them. I am so likely to miss something or forget something because this mod has about 100 or 200 items. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to everything. You will need to just play around with stuff is the best way that I can describe it. Look up other tutorials, look up other people doing stuff. I'm only one person and my brain sometimes is stupid. So that's the warning, because now we're getting into potentially more complex stuff than this basic thing. So once we have brass, we need to start with the mechanical crafter. The mechanical crafter requires brass casings, which we know how to make. We've made casings before, but it also requires a thing called an electron tube. These are kind of difficult to make since redstone is not automatable and they require a lot of it. It is 8 redstone dust for every one of these, and you use these pretty frequently. It is at this point where having at least a little bit of redstone is really good. You might want to look into, for your mod pack, depending on what things are available, fully automating a redstone farm. It is partially doable in the base create mod. And let me explain. Redstone can be made from a potion of strength and cinder flour. Both of these things are a little bit difficult to make, but doable. Potion of strength, you can do, you know how to make this now. The cinder flour, however, is not renewable. In the base create mod, netherrack is required to crush into cinder flour, which cannot be renewed. As you can see, these are the only 2 ways to get netherrack. But since mining netherrack is literally the easiest thing in the world, so much easier in fact than getting redstone, for every 1 piece of netherrack you mine, you get 1.5 pieces of cinder flour, meaning you get 1.5 pieces of redstone. I do have a redstone farm on my channel. It assumes that you have some mods installed, but you don't need them if you don't want them. You can just supply your netherrack yourself and then you're good to go. So with that info, let's get into mechanical crafters. We're assuming that you have all the ingredients for this, and we're going to need 24 in total because we're going to be making a kind of interesting shape. Mechanical crafters work in a way where they will connect together based on where you place them. So I'm placing them on this block, which means they'll be facing downward. You can rotate it with a wrench in all the ways around. Clicking on the other sides doesn't do anything. So let's place down a kind of strange shape here. We're going to go 5 blocks tall, maybe 6 blocks tall, and then make a cog-shaped thing on the outside. Notice how all of these arrows are pointing in towards a select point, except for these bottom 3. I'm going to rotate these so that they go over to this one and then out. If I grab a barrel and put it at the end here, what's going to happen here are all of these items all the way from here are going to go get squished down following their arrows and then get put into this, which is then going to craft the item and put it in the barrel. Crushing wheels do require this system. It actually needs 21 mechanical crafters. I apologize for that. And as you can see, we need a bunch of andesite alloy, planks, and a stone type. When we have those types of things, we're going to just place it in around. And once we have that, we need to power this thing. And you might, and rightfully so, be worried about this because once we connect it to power, you'll see why. You can see that with one large water wheel, we can power all of these, but it is very, very slow. You might have to keep it like that for a little bit until you get a steam engine or additional power. And as it finishes crafting this item, we should see a cogwheel pop up, and once that happens, it'll go into this barrel here. In older versions of the Create mod, you might need to power the mechanical crafter with a lever for it to start the crafting recipe. Since I'm in a newer version, it will do it automatically, but usually once you fill in everything, you would need to flick this lever to have everything go in. But apparently in the new version of the Create mod, it'll automatically do it if it's the correct recipe, as you can see. Now that we have crushing wheels, we can actually get started on fully automating and potentially even increasing our ore production. In order to basically double your ore production, you will need Silk Touch. If you don't have this, it's not as useful, but crushing wheels in and of themselves are still very helpful. As you can see, we can convert iron into crushed ore with a 75% chance of another one, which we can then smelt or even wash into a full iron ingot with a potential chance of redstone. That is super useful, but there are more useful things with crushing wheels. Crushing wheels have better odds and more options for when they're crushing stuff than millstones, which is kind of going to be what I'm comparing it to. It can also process many more items at a time, able to do a stack in crushing at a singular time instead of just one item like a millstone. You can crush things like tuff into certain ingots and things. Again, you can crush netherrack into cinderflower, which is really helpful, and the list goes on. Crushing wheels kind of just let you open up your opportunities to be able to automate more. You want to think as everything in the create mod as something that can be automatable. It might not be 100% automatable, like as we discussed previously redstone, but everything can be automatable. If you want sand, don't go to a desert and mine sand. Make a cobblestone generator. Crush it into gravel with crushing wheels. Crush that into sand. Then you have an infinite amount of sand. You never have to go mining for sand again, and that's a really easy farm to make. There are so many farms that you can make. There are so many farms that you can use on tutorials on YouTube. I literally have so many. If you want to check those out, you obviously don't need to, but they're a great source of information for things that you can physically automate. JEI is going to be your friend. Everything that a crushing wheel can make, everything that a farm can do will be available here. If you want flint or you want a bunch of, let's say, bricks for a farm, you can get clay, you can crush clay blocks or gravel into clay. There's so many ways that you can do everything. You just have to use your resources. So now that we have crushing wheels, it'll make it a lot easier to automate more things, but that doesn't really help us in getting a house or using all of these other tools. So I've already talked about the mechanical crafters, brass funnels, and these tunnels, but some things I haven't talked about are the mechanical arm. I honestly forget if I talked about the smart chute. I think we have, and the smart observer. The mechanical arm and deployer both require rotational force. You can see that the deployer is actually moving and looks to be doing something. If we hand it an item, it will place the block down in front of you. You can also see when looking up the recipe for casings, you can have a deployer place it on a stripped log like we do normally when making casings. But instead of you doing it, it can do it on a depot or a belt with the andesite alloy in its hand. This makes it extremely valuable for those types of farms, but also any farm that requires you to break or place blocks. Let's say we put an andesite casing in front of this thing. When looking at it with our goggles on, you can see that the mode is in use. That means it'll try to keep placing blocks. If there's a block in the way, then it won't move anymore. As soon as you break that block, it'll replace it. If you right click the hand part with a wrench, you can see there's two different hitboxes here. If you right click the hand part with a wrench, it'll turn it into attack mode. Hovering over it now, you can see that it's a fist and it says attack mode. Unless I'm mistaken, we should see this try to break this block, but maybe that has changed. Anyway, if we were to hand this thing a sword, to get it into attack mode for real and spawn an animal, you could see that it is able to hit it. The deployer will be able to use looting and sweeping edge to its advantage. So if you have a farm that requires manual player killing, like an XP farm, you can do that. The mechanical arm is relatively similar, but it does have some differences. Do you remember how I talked about having to feed this blaze burner by giving it a fuel source? What if instead of doing that, we could automate it? If we right click a target with it, you can see that it is set to deposit items into the blaze burner. It is only able to work with create contraptions, so we can't just use a barrel here. But if instead we had a barrel going out onto a depot, we have the mechanical arm deposit into this. And then if you right click and have it take items from this, you can right click again if you want it to deposit more or take more or whatever, have it take from this, deposit into this, and then we simply power it. You could see that it does get out of range. But if we move this over, taking from there, depositing to there, you could see that it starts to move. It will take an item from there and then put it into our blaze burner here. This is the main way steam engines will be able to get power, and we'll talk about steam engines relatively soon. As for the smart observer, it is not like a normal observer. It does not make a redstone pulse when you place blocks in front of it. It will only make a pulse for the filtered block that you set if it's the filtered block in front of it. You can see that this isn't providing a pulse at all, but the spruce plank is. You can also see that this is powered indefinitely. In some instances of the create mod, the deployer will not move when it's being powered. You can see, however, in my version that this is not the case. It is the case. As soon as it gets back to the front, it will no longer move because it is being powered by the side. Now let's talk about the new redstone options that are introduced. There are plenty of different items. Each one does a slightly different thing. Let's start off with the pulse timer. As you can probably guess, this is a timer that you can set if you hold it and right click to a certain amount of ticks for it to continuously repeat. Next to the pulse repeater, this is the one with the one singular one. The pulse extender has two, and this will, if we increase the time of this, extend the pulse or delay it to 27 ticks later. You can do this up to an hour, and it will hold this pulse for when an hour comes to pulse once. A pulse extender does kind of the opposite. If you increase this, it will hold the pulse for 30 ticks. If this pulse gets powered again before that 30 ticks is up, it will just never get unpowered. If we go to 14 ticks, you could see very briefly, maybe not, to 11, very briefly it turns off. But if we get closer up to 15, yeah, 13 seems to be the limit where that briefly gets turned off, and then 14, it just stays powered. Redstone links are probably my favorite one. These things are super useful, and they're basically just wireless redstone. There are two filter options here that you can put in any amount of items in either one, and those will determine what signal you're using. An empty one can be used to power an empty one from far away. As we can see, this is now getting that information. If you right click it with a wrench, it will turn it into receive mode. If it's not in receive mode, nothing will happen. So right clicking with a wrench will turn it into receive mode with this satellite dish around it. You cannot power a receive mode thing for it to send it back to this one in either configuration. It needs to be sending and receiving for it to be powered. You can change the format here. So let's say we change it to this. You can see that this no longer gets powered. This would have to be the same one for it to get powered properly. An analog lever is basically a thing that lets you determine the pulse length. So you can see that this now has a power level of 1. We flicked it once. If we flick it 4 more times, 1, 2, 3, 4, you should see that this now has a power level of 5, and this redstone goes out 5 blocks. This isn't super useful, but maybe it is for some of you redstone nerds that are better than me at it. The last two are powered latch and powered toggle latch. You can see the only difference is that the powered latch has a thing on the side. If we put a redstone dust in the middle, you can see that it will connect up to the powered latch here. I just set up this little system that will delay itself 16 ticks and then turn itself off. This means that any power that you receive from the side of it will turn off the thing, basically giving it a T flip-flop, I think is what it's called. This one is kind of similar. However, there's no way for it to turn itself off, or so you may think. If you power it from behind and then power it again, it will turn itself back off. The same is not true for the powered latch. If we remove this, you can see that powering this multiple times does nothing. This can be used along with the pulse repeater and pulse extenders to make a cool redstone clock that is now obsolete due to the pulse timer, but if you're in an older version of the Create mod, it's still a thing. If you get the extender, repeater, extender, and then you just go around in a circle, you can make a clock. You do have to power it from behind though. And all you have to do to extend it is to change that number. One final thing to mention are these things called redstone contacts. They, if you connect it up to another contact, will power themselves. So what you could do is connect this up to a contraption, and when it comes back and connects back up, you can then send this pulse off for the contraption to do something else. In the newest version of the Create mod, there are some updates to how storage works. The item vault, which is an item that has already existed, is basically like a fluid tank. We'll get to fluid tanks in a few minutes, but what this will do is it'll store items for you. The only issue is it's kind of difficult to interact with. You can use funnels or chutes to put items into it or take them out. You can also use a thing called an item hatch, at least in the new versions, that if you right click, it'll put an item in there. We can see, if we break the item vault, you can see that the item hatch comes out. The new update also provides some other things, but I'll get to why I'm not covering that in a while. The benefit with item vaults is that alongside other mods, these things can hold a ton of miscellaneous items and are really useful for a large amount of weird storage. They're not as good as drawers for holding large quantities of items, but if you're able to use like refined storage or something and want a bunch of small storage things, and you want to be able to store a bunch of singular items like books or a singular item hatch or something like that, then item vaults are the way to go. Let's talk briefly about contraptions. There are a few more contraption possibilities, including a gantry shaft, which if we put a gantry carriage on it and invert this, it will be able to move the gantry carriage across the way. You can shift click onto the gantry carriage to then invert the direction of it so that if we flip this around, they'll both go in different directions. There's a thing called a clockwork bearing that, when given power, will be able to set up hour, minute, and other hands to work like a clock if you wanted to put one on the side of a large train station or something. There's a thing called a rope pulley that will go up and down, and if you connect it to something like a drill or a whole section of drills glued together, will let you dig the ground out. This can be super useful for mining machines, and I have made my own massive quarry that you can check out. I'll link it in the top right of the screen again, but that is a very late game thing and it's very complicated. So maybe if you're watching this video, do your own testing first to see how it works. But there are much easier contraptions, that the one I've just linked, that will just mine the drills all the way down, and then it'll come back up, and then you can pick it up in a micro contraption and bring it somewhere else. If you, on an item, hold W, it'll let you go to the ponder menu. The ponder menu is basically everything that you need to know to learn about how things work. It'll show you exactly how to use whatever thing you're trying to ponder about, as well as give you some examples about how they work. This is a great resource and definitely the first place I would look if I'm curious about a new item. Elevator pulleys and contraption controls are equally an interesting thing. This will let you basically put an elevator in your base. Contraption controls are a little bit different, and we can explain why in a second. In normal contraptions, let's say this one, for example, all of these things will work at all times, no matter what we do. So as long as this minecart is moving, all of the harvesters, all the saws, all of the drills, if you had those, would be going and mining all of these blocks. Contraption controls, if we put them here, and let's say we put a saw in their thing, this would let us turn on and off saws for the contraption. All we would need to do is turn it into a contraption, power it, and then you can see the saws will no longer do anything. If we try to push this thing, it will go, but the saws will never function. As soon as we turn off the saws and push it once more, the saws will start mining again. There's also another option with contraption controls that will work with elevator pulleys. If you right-click the pulley with the contraption controls in there, it will turn all of these things into what we need. So we're just using 2 redstone contacts here that has now converted this into an elevator contact. This is now a moving contraption, and the contraption controls will tell you what floor you want to go to. So this is floor level 1, floor description, first floor. We can set this one to floor level 2 and second floor. Now we can use the contraption controls, right click it, and bring ourselves down to the first floor. You can also put a lever or other power source on a redstone contact to call the thing upward. So this is super useful if you want an elevator. It's absolutely doable. So just by going up, you can get to the second floor. Now it's time to talk about trains. Trains are pretty complicated. They're not as complicated as the new Create Mod updates, at least in my opinion, but there's a lot that you can do with them. We are going to do the very, very basics, but let's say you wanted some train tracks, you can place them down, and if you click on the track, it will basically give you an option to go all the way along and place a bunch of tracks. But now, how do you get a train? First, we're gonna need a train station. You can click this on a track, place down the train station, and then this is the train station. If you want to build a train, you'll have to go into the train station and select create a new track. And now if you have a train casing, you can see a little blue section appear for where the train can be. If we increase the length of the track backwards and we put down a train casing, you can see that a thing called a bogie appears. I don't know why they're called this. I'm not a train person. You can also see that behind the bogie are more blue spots. These are optional yet possible locations to place more bogies. These bogies need to be connected, however, if you want to make a real train. So I'm going to go all the way along and just connect them like this. This will turn into a contraption, so you will need to glue all these together, but as you can see on the edges of the bogies are little glue bits, so we don't need to do anything crazy with those. In order to make the train actually function, we're going to need first a seat for us to sit in, some controls to control the train while it's driving, and we'll want to glue these together. Once that's done, we have a super basic train. We can assemble the train, and if we get in the seat and click the contraption controls, we can now drive the train. This isn't super useful by itself, but we can do some more to it. Disassembling the train again, we can get item vaults or fluid tanks, put them on the train themselves, and then when the train is built, these will be turned into movable storage. This can help when you're traveling far distances and then you have a farm way far away, like a guardian farm or something like that, that you need a bunch of item vaults to transfer all the items back. And when using a portable storage interface or a portable fluid interface, you can connect it it with a stationary one, and if we rebuild the train and move this around, you should see that those portable storage interfaces connect. Usually if a train were to connect up to the station, those would connect, and if we just had a chute underneath this interface, all the items from the item vault would be dropped out, making it really easy to transport a lot of things. Obviously, you can do the same thing with fluid interfaces. Train tracks do not need to be loaded in. If you're going a million miles that way and the place way down there has your friend and they're loading in that area, they can give you a bunch of items, have the train send itself all the way back, and it'll arrive here with all those items in the expected amount of time to deliver them. The new create mod update, as I will talk about later, is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to just link a really good tutorial that I've seen, which I would recommend watching. So I am not going to go over all of the new update stuff for trains. Before we move on to steam engines, there is kind of one section of items that I've been ignoring, and those are all of the things made out of copper. Copper and copper casings are mostly used for fluid transport, movement, and otherwise usage. It can make a bunch of different things, including some that are incredibly useful. Let's go over the hose pulley. Let's go over fluid tanks, pipes, and mechanical pumps first. Fluid tanks, if you connect them up in a 2x2, will connect into a larger fluid tank. The same is true for a 3x3. You can then increase the height of this thing to increase the capacity. If, let's say, we have a source of lava over here and we want to get it to the fluid tank, we would have to connect it up with pipes. This won't let the lava flow, however, because there isn't a way to push it anywhere. So right now it's just a connection. If we put in a mechanical pump and make sure the arrows are pointing in the direction that we want to go, we can connect this up to power. You could right click fluid pipes to turn them into glass to make sure that they're moving, but now you could see this fluid tank is filling up. The faster the mechanical pump is powered, the faster this increases. You can also set filters to these things. This is a smart fluid pipe, and if we set a filter to, let's say, water, no lava will get past. Something interesting was happening. I don't know if this was a bug, but when I had the fluid pipe here, it still let lava through. So instead, I moved it to behind the mechanical pump, setting it to water, and now we can see, if we right click this, there is no lava flowing through it. The second we switch this over to lava, it starts filling up again. This is really useful for mixing potions and stuff when you want just the strength potion to be taken out, but not the awkward potion. You can also obviously set potions as the filter, so that's what you would do if you wanted to do a potion bottle. Bottle O XP also works in here if you want to filter out XP. Now that we have this out of the way, let's get to the hose pulley. This is probably the most useful block in very specific circumstances. See, there is a kind of rule or a fundamental truth about the create universe that with very large bodies of water, hose pulleys will consider them infinite. If we place down a hose pulley and connect it up to some sort of power, it will start going downward. If it's not going downward, that's because the power is backwards and it's already going up. And once it's at the top, it won't move anymore because it's already up there. But if we bring it down, we can see that it will go into the liquid underneath. And once it reaches the bottom, we may see that it says it's an infinite source. We might have to, however, wait a second and have this go into a fluid tank for now and power it for a second. Yes, once it powers and pulls in its first source of water, you can see that this has switched to a bottomless supply. When there are over 10,000 sources of any liquid in the game, the hose pulley will consider that source infinite. It has to be above 10,000 sources. So if you have 10,001, it'll work. If you have exactly 10,000, it will start pulling from those sources. Obviously, this is a massive ocean of water, so of course it's a bottomless supply. But you could do the same thing with lava. You could do it in the nether, you could do it in a cave deep underground, you could just make a big hole, you could do all those things. The other use for this thing is, if we bring this back up and we were to put it, let's bring it up one more, back up to the surface. If we wanted to fill up water to this level, we could pump water from here into the hose pulley and it would place in sources on all of those areas. Obviously, we only had one source block in here, but if you had enough, you could fill it more in. There is a max amount for this, and it is 10,000 blocks. If you place in 10,000 blocks manually, then the hose pulley will say, no more, it's an infinite source. This doesn't actually mean that it's an infinite source because it's a little bit broken, so you will have to place a few more if you want to make an infinite source from scratch. But with that, let's get to making a steam engine. A steam engine uses these fluid tanks, these blaze burners, lava, which you might want to get an infinite source of with a hose pulley, all to make a ton of stress units. I have a full in-depth video on steam engines. It's a little bit older, so it's not as good as this one probably is going to be, but I do have a tutorial for a really good steam engine there that I enjoy quite a bit, but I'll give you the basic rundown. Putting blaze burners down on the ground with a bit of fluid tanks will not do anything. You need the legitimate block called a steam engine for it to convert itself into a boiler. A boiler, when hovering over it with the engineer's goggles, gives you some information about it. That information includes the size, heat, and water. You can see that both size and heat are both at 1 green tick while water is at 1 red tick. That is because we're not actually pumping any water into this thing. If we grab a pipe and stuff and we make an infinite water source, you can make an infinite water source much easier than a lava source. You don't need to do the whole hose pulley thing in an ocean. You can just have a mechanical pump with a normal infinite source. And if you put this down, it will then feed in water. You can see some information about the boiler as well. The status says that it's passive, which means these blaze burners are not active, but they're still giving it a little bit of heat. You can also see that we now have a bunch of green bars of water, but not a lot of green bars of size or heat, which means even though we have plenty of water, we're still only generating the minimum amount that a steam engine can make. You can also see that this amount is 2048, which is 4 times what can be made from a large water wheel. So at a minimum, this little contraption here makes more stress units than 4 large water wheels. You could increase the boiler size by just building it taller. The max height is 4 blocks tall. If you want to increase the size, because as you can see, we're only at 4 out of that big number, you will need to make this into a 3x3. Once it is a 3x3, you can see the size has increased dramatically, which also means we're able to increase the height of this. You could keep going and going and going up until a point. You can see that the size has now maxed out, and building any higher doesn't do anything. You don't need to obviously build this high. If you want, you can build 4 blocks tall, and then you'll have a level 9 steam engine, which is kind of the maximum that you can get in mid to early game. We will talk about the max size steam engine, which generates, I think, upwards of 300,000 stress units. But now that we have the size and the water for this, we need heat. And conveniently, I have lava right next to me, but in order to get heat for this thing, we need to give all of these blaze burners lava. You can also do other burning things, but since lava burns for 16 minutes, it is easily the best one. It is also pretty easy to optimize, but you could make a coal or charcoal farm that would work wonders. You might be able to notice when looking at the boiler, now that we have 4 blaze burners, our heat level is moved up to 4. If we want to increase it anymore, we'll have to put in many more, which is what I'm gonna do. So let's put lava in each one of these guys, and now we can see that we have a boiler status level 9. Our heat and size are all the way up to 9. Our water's a little bit more, but that's okay. And we have 147,000 stress units available. It says that it's via 2 steam engines, which if we put shafts across from, you can see that these guys start spinning. Now that those are in, let's connect them up with some chain drives and we can check their stress units. As you can see, they're only generating 32,000 stress units. That is because if we hover over the steam engine itself, the kinetic stress capacity is 16,000, which means in order to use all 147,000 stress units that this thing is generating, we need way more steam engines. Now that we have those and try to connect them all up, we should see, I did 9 in total, that we now have the 147,000 stress units that this steam engine can produce at a given time, with all of these only doing 16,000. Now that we have this much stress units, we can basically power everything we need at whatever speed we want. If you have a billion farms, you might need to make more stress units with more steam engines, but for now that's fine. What I would heavily recommend right now, if you're not building the one from my tutorial, is that you set up a way to automate these blaze burners. If these turn off, your whole machine and farms and everything will stop. As I mentioned previously, the best way to do this is with a mechanical arm. You can have it deposit into each one of these blaze burners so that whenever they get empty, this thing will refill it immediately. That does come at a cost, however. To do it with lava is a little bit more complicated, but even so, you need an infinite source of whatever fuel you're using. Charcoal may be the best early game, but I really like lava a lot more since it is used in a lot more things, and you'll need it eventually anyway. If you don't have it yet though, make an easy charcoal farm with the tree farm system that we showed earlier, and it'll work. Now that we have a steam engine, we need a workshop. I mentioned briefly that you could have made a pretty fancy workshop here, and if you're doing that, just keep improving it, keep building on it, build everything that you may think you need. This can include upgrading this to now have a haunting campfire, because this will now allow us to make like soul sand from sand or a bunch of other things. Bringing stuff from the steam engine and having it power power things at any bit of speed might become a bit of a hassle. And there are a lot of issues with these cog systems and them breaking if overstressed. So instead of doing this messy system, there is another option. There's an item called the rotation speed controller. It has a speedometer thing on it that will let you choose your target speed. If we place a power source on this side, then we can choose whatever speed we want this thing to spin at, and you can see that on the other side, it's spinning the same speed. That is because we need a large cog on top of this rotation speed controller. You could see that it then connects, and it is now going the speed that we decide. You could change it from clockwise to counterclockwise, and you can change the speed to whatever suits your needs. This thing is very expensive though, at least in the mid to early game, because it requires a precision mechanism. Precision mechanism is something that has an 80% chance of completion and otherwise will give you a random scrap, but you need to go through a gold sheet and with deployers only, put a cog, large cog, and iron nugget on this gold sheet in order 5 times. So this does mean that even if you were trying your best to never automate something, you need to automate this. This is something that is very doable to do by hand, but it's so tedious that it's just easier to automate it. There are a bunch of really cool farms for this, and I'm going to go over them shortly. But I wanted to bring that up before we got to the workshop. The workshop is something that I'm a huge fan of. I didn't make it in my first Create Mod series, and that was a huge mistake. It made it really hard to automate things that I didn't have a standalone farm for, and it made it really difficult for me to get stuff done without going through a farm, if that makes sense. In the Createaholic series that I'm playing at the moment, I'm on episode 18. Please check that out. It's such a good series. It's so fun. I have a workshop, and I've recently released a full workshop tutorial that you can just download and paste into your world. We'll get to how you do that in a second. The workshop should include everything that you may ever need to function without needing additional automation or it being exponentially more annoying. Depending on the mods that you have, if you have additional ones, like let's say mechanism, you may need to change up the workshop from what I'm going to show you because there might be better or easier ways to do that in different mods. To start our foray into workshops, I think it might be worth downloading the one that I made in my tutorial video and showing you how to set up a schematic, because even though they're very daunting, they're actually quite easy to figure out. It'll also make it possible for you to just paste this into whatever world you're playing in if you decide to do that. And if not, I will show you around everything that it is so that you can copy the ideas while still making it your own. So over on my channel, and I've linked this in the top right of the thing, let's go to the Ultimate Create Shop. Anyway, in this video, I show you how to set up the schematic, but we're gonna go over it very briefly and what a schematic is. In the description, we have schematics for both Create 5.0 and 6.0 that'll bring you to createmod.com. This is a site run by Ubersui. He is a legend in the Create Mod community. This site is amazing. You can see that I have a bunch of other farms in here that you can check out if you wish, but all we have to do is download this NBT file, head over to Minecraft, and then get a schematic table. A schematic table is really cheap to make. It's really simple. And once we place that in your world, you should have something that is, for you, empty. If you open the folder, it'll bring up a folder system with a schematics file. Going to our downloads, we're just going to grab the NBT file that we downloaded, throw it into our schematics folder. Heading back to Minecraft now, if we refresh the page, we can see that we now have the Create 6.0 Ultimate Starter House. If we throw in an empty schematic in here, which is just paper and some light blue dye, hit the check mark, that will load all the way through, downloading the schematic file into a thing that we can configure and place into our world. You can see that when you're holding the schematic file, you can place it in anywhere that you want. If you right click, you can see that we now have a translucent kind of building here, which is the schematic file that I made. This can be transferred into any world that you'd like, and it's pretty useful. You can see up at the bottom, you can scroll between different things. There's moving between the X and the Y axis. If you hold Shift and then scroll wheel, you'll be able to move that in either X or Z. Switching to moving in the Y direction, you can move it up or down. You can rechange the position. So by right clicking again under position, you can rotate it or you could flip it. Since I'm in creative, I have a print button. You will not have that if you're in survival. Instead, we're going to need to grab something called a schematic cannon. With the schematic cannon, this has an interesting UI. Once you've placed in the schematic, you can shift click it in and it'll be brought to this spot. You can see that it tells you that, oh, we're out of gunpowder. That means we need to go get some. If we put in a bunch of gunpowder, you can see that it loads in this section here, and it also shows you what you have. You have 400 shots with a backup of 25,000 if you have a stack. If you don't have a stack, then you just have 400 shots left. If we were to try to play this, it immediately says, oh, we're missing items. Well, how do I get items into this thing? We're going to need to put down a bunch of inventories around this thing so that if we were to grab, let's say, a dirt block and put it in here, it will place it. But this is a horrible way to get all the items we need for the schematic. Instead, we can grab either a book or a clipboard, both work, shift click it in. You can see place a clipboard or book here, and it'll print a checklist for your schematic. You can see that we have 23 pages, all of the items that we need to get. This is a ton of stuff to get, but for a fully completed workshop that honestly I think is the best one that I've seen. I haven't looked at too many, but I'm biased. I don't think that's too bad of a deal. You might want to also stop this because when you put items in, it'll just keep throwing them out. And I'd much rather, at least in my opinion, wait until the end and then hit play. Andesite's on our list, and let's say we put in enough andesite to satiate this just one stack of andesite that we need. If we put that back in the material checklist, you can see that it is gone from the front page and it is brought all the way to the back where there's now andesite, but it's checked off, telling you that you already have it created. You'll then just need to follow all of these and for the rest of the items in here. And once you have that, your schematic cannon and the book will be fully empty. All of these will be checked and you'll be good to start the farm. I'm using something called a creative crate, which basically lets me use any item from the game. And then if we check over here, there are some other configuration options that I at least recommend to look at. There are 4 different ways to do it. You can don't replace solid blocks, replace solid with solid, replace solid with any, and replace solid with empty. All of these do different things and you can hold shift for each of them. But this basically says, if there's grass in the way, don't replace it with anything. If there's grass in the way, replace it with other full blocks. So that means redstone will not replace a full block, but other things will. This one will replace solid with any, so now redstone or other non-full blocks will work, and then replace solid with empty will mean even air is included. Skip missing blocks is an option that I sometimes like to turn on depending on how easy or difficult the schematic is. If there's a thing like a creative motor in there, it will not be able to be placed. So you will have to turn this on for those types of builds, and protecting block entities you should probably always do. With that though, we can place this in, and if you wanted to, you can increase the speed of a schematic cannon by going to create, configure, and then gameplay, schematics, schematic cannon delay, drop it to 1, save, and now it's fast. Obviously, if you're in a server or you don't like cheating, maybe don't do this, but for me, I'm doing a tutorial. That's my job. And as you can see, this is just getting placed in. This thing is super fast. I'm killing a horse. I feel really bad. That's okay. But as this is getting placed in, you can just do other stuff. As long as this is loaded into the world, you're good. You just have to make sure that you have all the items and that you have enough gunpowder. When the schematic cannon's done, it will have a little ding, and when you right click it, it'll say finished with the empty schematic here. Now that we have the workshop in front of us, let me go over all the things that I would recommend you having in your base. Obviously, an enchanting, disenchanting, and anvil setup. You'll want crops of some sort, some decoration, of course, and a place to store animals. And that's just on the outside. On the inside, you need a source for power generation. I super recommend a steam engine. You'll need plenty of storage, the same washing, smoking, lava-ing, and haunting system that we have and we have already made over at our original system. You will want a compacting area, a pressing area, item draining, a mixing station with water available to be put in, and if you wish, a blaze burner in this spot here, which actually was removed for whatever reason. You'll need a saw and a mechanical crafting system. Here's one of the precision mechanism farms that I talked about briefly. If you feed it in gold ingots from here and you give these cogs, large cogs, and nuggets, it will go through and do everything by itself. If you want to see this running, check out the main warehouse video. We have an ore processing system that can potentially get you XP if you wish. We have a andesite, copper, and brass casings farm right here where you just empty in logs to this spot and the alloy to there. We have a cog kind of crafting machine and your general crushing wheels. So those are all the things that I would recommend for a warehouse type thing. Once you have all that, you can kind of just get started with building whatever base, whatever thing, whatever machines, whatever farms you want to do. At this point, you're just back to Minecraft. This isn't the end of whatever game you're playing. This is kind of just the start. If you've seen my Create-a-Holics playthrough, you'll see that I made this on episode 2. Since then, I have made an auto enchanting and XP farm, a massive church where I can do a bunch of villager trading automatically with some other mods. I've made multiple silos to house all of my steam engines to generate 700,000 stress units. I've made an ore processing facility, an automatic ore farm. I've made a cobblestone, stone, gravel, and sand generator. I've made an andesite, diorite, and granite farm. I've made a train station to hook up to all the other people's bases. There's so much that you can do, and I've not even started in the Create-a-Holics, basically. eventually. So set yourself a goal. Set yourself something that you want to accomplish in the create mod, whether it's automating everything in the game. You can automate all of the andesite age. You can automate all of the brass age. Everything is possible. And speaking of automating everything, I mentioned that this is not the end. This is probably mid-game, if I were to guess. There is an end game, and it's a factory that generates everything that you would ever need so that you don't have to resource gather anything for your next build, for your next contraption. No matter what, you'll be good. And I have been leaving out probably the most important thing in the create mod, the new Create 6.0 update. This update is absolutely insane and wild. There is so much new happening with it. It is so complicated, and I'm not going to explain it in this video. I am linking up on the top right of the screen right now the, in my opinion, best Create 6.0 tutorial that I have seen. It taught me so much about it, and I don't think I could do any better, which is why I'm not going to. This is really only useful for the late game of the Create mod. I kind of don't see a reason why you would want to do this before then, but to give you a taste of what you can do in the mid-late game, closer to late game thing of the create mod, you're looking at this. This is a fully automated system that will run on its own. It'll request items on its own. It'll stock up these item vaults for storage all on its own, where we can access it through this. All of these items have been generated without me getting anything, without me crafting anything. Everything was fully automated. We're just using 3 farms, a cobblestone generator, a tree farm, and a kelp farm. Everything else is created from the steam engine powering it and all of the things that you can do in the create mod. There are plenty of new items called frog ports or chain conveyors that will transport a bunch of items and things called packages around your whole base. If you make a massive factory, you can fill it with these chain drives, having packages fly above you as you're walking around your factory, looking at all of the contraptions that you can make, looking at your factory board to see what things are still being generated and which are done. As for us here, everything here is done, and this is just one of the 3 ages of the create mod. There's still copper and brass that I have yet to make a farm for, but we're going to. And you can do so much more. You can make a factory for all the types of copper blocks. You could do copper stairs, copper casings, copper whatever. And depending on the mods you have, you can maybe even automate it from the beginning. You might not even need to go get copper. If you have a copper farm that you can make, you could do it. So I really hope this video has quelled some of the fears with the create mod, that it has helped you at least the best that I could have in getting you off the ground and running to start playing the create mod, to start innovating, to start automating. I appreciate you all watching. If you're new here, leave a like, check out all of my other videos. There's so much good information there, and I will see you in the next video. Peace. Welcome to the greatest machine I have ever made. Scratch that. This is the best machine I've ever made. With the exact same features as my original farm, except now we can remove any and all liquids from the perimeter itself. This is great if you want to actually use the perimeter for, let's say, a mob farm or something like that. You won't have to manually remove thousands and thousands of blocks of liquids. Instead, the quarry will do it for you, and it will just take a couple hours longer than my original quarry design to remove those liquids. The quarry does require 2 passes to clear out all of the liquids because water continues to make sources, but if you're building it in something like the Nether, you will not need to run it twice, as lava will get deleted while the machine is mining. You will also need to manually block off any walls where there is liquid flowing out of, because it will not place blocks there. But the way we get rid of the liquids is really simple. We have deployers placing moss blocks straight in front of drills which mine them immediately. I explain why we use moss specifically, but that means that there isn't a different system for the Nether or the overworld. You can use the same system for both. We have, of course, the 128 by 128 and the 256 by 256 versions that are available for my other quarry design as well. And if you want to set up this one, it has the same setup process, and I will go over any changes a little bit later in the video. But this quarry will mine out the whole area that you need, clearing all of the liquids, and I also show you how to get rid of any cobwebs since drills can't mine those naturally. But that is the quarry. I hope you enjoy it, and stay tuned for the rest of the video on how to set it up and why I made certain choices over others. Welcome back to another create mod video, and we're back on the same topic that we were like a couple weeks ago, but we have improved it
so much more. You might be wondering how, because it looks like there's still a bunch of water, less lava, but maybe that's just world gen, and I will show you. We have dug out a whole area here, but why is this one better? Why should you use this instead of the one that I released a couple of weeks ago? Well, that is literally only this redstone link here and a couple of modifications we made to the miner itself. In the previous video, you saw that I couldn't really remove liquids all too well, and here we can't also, but that's not true. This used to be full with way more liquids that we cleared out quite a few of, and as you can see, there's way less lava. These are all intentional because of the modifications that we made. This does not make my previous quarries obsolete in any way at all. This is just a modification or an addition so that if you want a full perimeter removed of all liquids or any blocks or any like entities or something like that, like cobwebs I think count, then this is how you would want to do it. You don't want to use the other farm because removing liquids manually is a pain when it's on this big of a scale. I've made a smaller replica here of the new mining machine. You can see that there are deployers in the center, drills beneath them, so that when we go down, we mine any blocks that are in the way. And the deployers here will place blocks directly underneath the drills so that if there is a liquid block or an air gap at all, it will hopefully place this block here. So let's see it in action. We have a bit of water here that we will make disappear. So if we just invert this, I'm gonna let this go at a little bit slower of a speed, but you can see that we place moss in, which is required in the barrels for this to go. But then you can see that the water is disappearing rapidly. And once we get to the bottom, it'll be all gone. The only issue, as you can see, and that as I mentioned in my previous video, is that the deployers will place blocks coming back up, which defeats the purpose of a quarry. Because if you place the blocks back, it's not very quarry-like. That's more of just a remove liquids in a thing, which isn't helpful, which is where some of you brilliant people told me about contraption controls. I've been playing this game for a little bit. I've been playing the create mod for almost a year. I've made like some crazy stuff. Never have to deal with contraption controls. So let's go over what they are. So if we go into skim through Blockland, you can see that we have a contraption control here. The filter is set to deployers as well, which means that whenever this redstone link powers the contraption controls, then whatever is in the filter will not work. So all we have to do is when this is moving up, power the contraption controls, and then the deployers will not place any blocks. This is how we get the pretty much fully empty space here, except for some cobble and lava gen, because that's how things work a little bit, but I'll show you exactly how to remove all the remaining liquids. Another thing you might see is that we have cobwebs here. And if you're mining in like either a mine shaft or a Badlands biome, where there are probably just way more mine shafts, but also a bunch of cobwebs, this can be an issue if you're trying to make a perimeter. To remove cobwebs, all we need to use are mechanical plows. So if let's just place a couple of these along, and let's just drop this to the other way, you can see mechanical plows eventually will break cobwebs. This is helpful for our design because obviously we don't want cobwebs in here. Especially if you're making a perimeter, it's just ugly and kind of weird that they're floating there. So this is a great way to fix it, but you can probably also tell that they're not in the base schematic of this machine. That's because cobwebs don't spawn in every perimeter. They are a little bit more expensive, and you'll need to swap out the top part of the drills with mechanical plows instead, so that you actually can break them. Because although we would like to take everything away right away on the first pass, it's kind of impossible to get everything. And that is because of water generation. You can see that there is literally no lava in the perimeter at all. Over here is because lava is flowing out of the walls and not because in the perimeter itself, but water is still here because water creates more infinite sources. And there's no way around this, since if you're mining, let's say, these blocks, it takes time to mine these blocks. If there's water here and water here, it'll create an infinite source. There's no way around this other than going over multiple passes, which isn't impossible. It just takes a little bit extra time. You might also be wondering, why don't we just put deployers facing sideways to place blocks on the walls themselves so that we actually can prevent the water from spreading and making source blocks? That's a great question, because in theory, it works. It works the whole time, except for when we're at the top, because if the mining machine is right here and we have deployers placing blocks to the side and it goes down, deployers will place blocks to the side right here, up in the air, and then we'll have a wall of blocks this whole way down. And there's not really a way to make sure that it starts, let's say right here, because if there aren't blocks here and there's water there, we would want to place blocks. That would be great. But the issue with that is then there's no real way to check it. And especially with a contraption, there's no way to guess the height of whatever block you're at, and there's no way to know what is the floor and what is deep beneath in like a cave or something. And I've decided that if we were gonna make a wall this tall of blocks, then it's probably just better to remove the little bits of water that are stuck in the sides of the walls. Like over here, we'll have to remove that bit, but that isn't too difficult compared to tearing down the entirety of a wall here that goes up 20 or 40 blocks. Switching gears now to talk about what blocks the deployers are placing. You might think, oh, why don't we just place dirt or cobble that we mine, and then we won't have to really worry about saving a specific block or setting a filter for it.